Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Today we are going to be looking at Judge Dredd The Cursed Earth, which is a reskin of a game that I have played several times on my channel before, The Lost Expedition. But in actuality, calling The Cursed Earth a reskin, it's a little bit of a misnomer because this is actually almost a completely different game. The core mechanisms are the same, but they have introduced new elements and generally just made a game that was already quite hard really difficult. So I'm not going to go through exactly how the game plays here at the start of the video. I'll cover rules as we play through. But I did just want to briefly mention what is different from The Lost Expedition for those people who have watched my playthroughs of The Lost Expedition and want to know upfront what is different. First of all, there is a new type of token. These are radiation tokens, which are never good, and there are new events in the game that can cause you to pick up radiation. The way it works is if at any point a character has less health tokens than they do radiation tokens, they die and are removed from the game. So every time you pick up a radiation token, you are shortening your health bar. The second thing they have done is they have introduced a race element. In The Lost Expedition, you just had to move through 8 location cards to find the lost city. Here we are out in the cursed earth looking for max normal. I am playing a group of judges and there is also a group of perps who are chasing him down as well. I am the black meeple and the perps are the grey meeple. If at any point they find max before me, it's game over, and throughout the game there will be cards that will advance their meeple. The third new feature is location cards now have abilities or events that trigger at certain times. I am starting on the Alabama Morass, and it says there that at the start of every investigation, gain a ration. That's a good thing. However, there are other cards that have a negative impact on your progress. Finally, we have new types of expertise. Judge Dredd here, he has the survival expertise represented by the little mountain range. Judge Giant has the diplomacy expertise, and Judge Anderson has psi powers, and psi powers work differently to the other expertise and generally hurt you when you use them as well. And of course, a lot of the cards are redone as well. They're not just straight ports from the Lost Expedition. It's not like you could go through the deck of exploration cards in Lost Expedition and find a perfect match in the Cursed Earth deck. They are completely new events. So this really is a completely new experience, and I don't think having the Lost Expedition necessarily rules out having the Cursed Earth in your collection as well. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to just play through the game. I will cover rules as we go, and then I will talk a little bit more about what I think about this particular version of the game. That's enough preamble, let's get going. As with the Lost Expedition, the game is divided up into stages. There is a dawn stage and then there is a dusk stage. We are starting in dawn, and there are special rules in place for solo where I have a hand of 6 cards, which I have just off camera here, and I also have a deck of cards which I will be drawing from. To start the dawn phase, we have to draw 2 cards from the top of the deck. I have drawn Dispensing Justice and Pushing Forward. And we can see here that we've got different coloured boxes. And again, just like in Lost Expedition, those boxes have specific meanings. The yellow boxes, you have to do whatever it says in those. The blue boxes are entirely optional. You can choose to ignore them if you so wish. And then there are some cards that have red boxes. And no matter how many red boxes there are, you have to do one and only one of them. So first off, we have Dispensing Justice, and we can see here it has the violence icon, which means you have to spend a bullet token if you have one. If you don't, then you have to spend wounds instead. But if we do that, we will gain a diplomacy resource, which is very useful. We gain that by punching someone in the face, a very Dredd style of diplomacy. Next up we have Pushing Forward, which shows here that we have to take a radiation. After we've taken a radiation, we can choose to take another radiation, spend some rations, but we will advance our little meeple along the location track. That's a very costly way of advancing the meeple, but I know from my experience of the Lost Expedition that keeping the meeple moving is the only way you are going to win. So as we are in the dawn phase, the way this works is that the cards that are drawn will be played in numerical order. So we will deal with dispensing justice before we deal with pushing forward. I now have to pick 2 cards from my hand. A quick look through my hand of 6 cards lets me know that this game is indeed horrible and I can't see any obvious choices for things I want to do. But I am going to pick Wounded Dino and Abandoned Bunker. They are 2 low number cards, which means I should be able to play them quite early in the round, and they both have some beneficial stuff on them. There is a chance to get some rations, but if I take those rations, the perps will get to advance a space. And I should point out at this moment, the perps already have an advantage over a normal game, because they're supposed to start as far away from you as possible on the track, and normally the track starts out only 3 cards long. However, this particular location says that when it is revealed, you have to reveal the next location in the path. So right off the bat, before I'd even started playing, the perps had an advantage. And it's concerning to let them get even further ahead. However, rations are rations, and who doesn't love dino steaks? Having added those cards to the investigation track, I have to draw another card from the deck. I have drawn Evidence, which does give me an opportunity to advance along the path, but requires some diplomacy and some survival expertise to do that. I could alternatively use some psi powers. The final card I'm going to play from my hand is Campfire. So those are all my cards selected. Before we begin the investigation, because I am at the Alabama morass, I do gain a ration. So I get one of these tokens and add it to my stash. Somehow I feel that's the last time this game is going to throw me a bone. We now work through the cards from left to right. First of all, we have the Wounded Dino. I have to pick one of the red squares. One is Violence, which means shooting the dinosaur, or the other one is I have to take a wound. One of my judges will take a wound. At the moment, it's hard to know what to do right from the start. The Judge Anderson character is the only character that can use psi powers, and every time you use a psi power, it costs you a wound. So I kind of want to keep her at full health. I know that through the game I'm going to be picking up radiation, and I kind of feel like it's better to stack all of the radiation onto one character and then not have them take wounds, rather than spreading them out. But that's just a gut impression. I feel like ammo is going to be scarce, but violence is going to be common. If you don't have ammo and have to do violence, then you either have a character take 2 wounds or you outright kill a character. So I feel like I should save the ammo for when I'm forced to make violence checks. For example, here at Dispensing Justice, there is a yellow box with a violence icon, which means I have to do that action. And if those are going to keep coming up during the game, I kind of feel like I want the ammo for those situations. So maybe the best thing to do for now would be to, I guess, take a wound. And even as I'm talking, I'm kind of thinking maybe my initial thoughts were wrong, because Judge Anderson requires health to use the psi action, but if you ever get forced into using the psi action and you don't want to, you can instead just add a card to the end of this track here. So maybe she's the best person to take wounds. I'm going to take a wound. I'm going to take a wound from the dino. I'm going to apply it to Judge Anderson. This may already be a disaster, but this is my first time ever playing the game. I'm going in cold. We will see what happens. Having done the red choice, I now have the option of doing whatever is in the blue box. In this case, I have to let the perps get 1 space ahead of me, but I do gain 2 rations. I have been told that rations are hard to come by, so this is a calculated risk and I'm going to do it. I should point out, we have here a deck of location cards. Max Normal has been shuffled into the bottom 3 cards of that deck. And because this is my first game, I am playing on cadet level, so 3 cards have been removed from that particular location deck. So he's not as far away as he might be in a higher difficulty level game, which does make me a little bit concerned as the perps are already so close to him. The new location is the Great Dust Bowl, and I've been lucky there are no special abilities on this, although special abilities will only trigger if they say when revealed or if it is the judges who are on that space, so the perps will not activate any of those abilities. Our perps do a runner, but I get my 2 ration tokens. Next up we have a choice. I can either spend a survival expertise to advance my meeple, I can gain a bullet, or I can gain another ration. Now, I don't actually have any cards at the moment that I can spend for survivability, which means I can either spend a wound from Judge Dredd, who is my survival expert, or I can spend 2 wounds from any other character. I really do want to keep moving, but the possibility of picking up some more ammunition also sounds good. I do know that I have some cards in my hand which do require ammunition, and I've also got 3 cards coming up that will allow me to advance, although I pick up a lot of radiation doing it. It's a frustrating game. I'm going to take the ammunition. I'm so aware of the fact that if you don't have ammunition it costs so many wounds or outright kills a character. I'm going to take the ammo. Next up, it is time to dispense some justice. I am forced to make a violence action. I'm obviously going to spend the ammo that I just collected. And because of that, I now get to take this card. This card has the diplomacy action on it. I keep this, and at any time that I have to spend diplomacy, I can spend this card rather than spending wounds off of one of my agents. Agents? Judges. Next up, we have to take some radiation from pushing forward. I am going to give it to Anderson because Dredd and Giant both have expertise that you can spend 1 wound rather than 2 if you don't have the relevant card, whereas Anderson only has the Psi ability. So she has 4 health and 1 radiation. If at any point she has less health than radiation, she will die. What that effectively means is that 1 radiation token doesn't really hurt you, and I've just realised this, because you have to have less health than your radiation tokens. If you had less than 1, you would be dead anyway. So with that amazing piece of mathematical revelation, I know that I can actually give all of my judges 1 radiation as a freebie, as a get out of jail free. But then they will all be applied to Anderson thereafter. I have an option here, and I am definitely going to take it. I have to apply a radiation to someone, so we'll give it to Giant, I guess. I now have to spend some rations. The one thing I will say about these cards is you do have to be quite careful when you're looking at the iconography. For example, a picture of a can means gain a ration, like this one here, but a picture of a can in a circle means lose a ration. When you're glancing at the cards quickly, it's quite easy to mistake those. I spent 1 of my rations, but now I get to advance the meeple. The downside to that is that I have now left the Alabama morass, which means I have lost access to that ability to get extra ration tokens. Can have everything. Next up, we have found some evidence. We have a choice here. We can spend a survival expertise and a diplomacy expertise to advance the meeple, or we can use Anderson's psi powers. I am going to advance the meeple again. That does mean that Judge Dredd will have to take a wound because I do not have any expertise cards that I can spend for that. However, I do have a diplomacy expertise here which will keep Giant healthy. So we spend this. We spend this. And we get to advance the meeple again. This is what we like to see. Finally, we are at the campfire. We can either do a psi action and then take a radiation point and then move the meeple, or we can heal one of our characters. So Judge Dredd could regain that wound he has just lost. However, I feel that it is more important at the moment to keep chasing down those perps, so that is what I'm going to do. So, first of all, we have the Psi action. Our choices are, we add a card to the end of the path, or Anderson spends a wound to draw 4 cards and add 2 to the end of the path. I think I am going to use her ability because I want to get a better idea of what's coming up. So, we spend a wound from Anderson. We draw 4 cards from the top of the deck, and we will have to play these after the campfire, or 2 of them after the campfire, in numerical order. These are the cards. Spoiled Rations is not too bad, it just takes 1 of your ration tokens. That's, from some of the other cards that I'm seeing, that seems quite tame. We've got Bounty Hunters. Generally bad stuff, but you can use it to avoid cards. This means you will skip the next card in the track. This means you can swap 2 cards that are further down the track. Can be helpful earlier on in the turn. At this point, not so useful. This is a very, very good pull. I can either heal 2 wounds, but the perps will advance a space, or I can spend a ration to advance the meeple again. And also, I've got Hungry Muties, which means I can spend 2 rations to advance the meeple. I'm going to advance the meeple there. And then I would advance it another 2 if I use those 2. Yes, I would be running out of rations, but I will have made massive grounds. I will have actually overtaken the perps. And we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. I think that the closest Max can be is 8 spaces away, and the most he can be is 2 spaces on from that in the cadet mode, because this is easy mode. I've kind of got to take these 2. So we've used our Psi power, and that actually worked out quite nicely. I now have to take a radiation. I'm going to apply it to Judge Dredd because he doesn't have any radiation yet. And then I will advance the meeple. I've now found some Hungry Muties. I am going to give them my rations. So that's 2 ration tokens. And then I get to advance the meeple again. If I was playing the hardest difficulty level, at this point there would be a shootout because I've caught up with the perps, and there would be special rules for a shootout. I am playing on I'm a Big Baby level, so the shootout doesn't happen. We're in the Great Dust Bowl. We're at opposite ends. They didn't see me, I didn't see them. Now this is an interesting choice. I can heal 2 wounds, or I can advance the meeple again. From playing the Lost Expedition, I know that it's usually a bad call to ignore taking the advance a meeple action. My judges are all pretty healthy at the moment. Okay, Anderson's a bit beaten up, but Dredd's only taken 1 wound and Giant is at full health. I don't have any expertise cards, which means people might start taking a battering soon, but I've already avoided advancing the meeple once to pick up the extra ammunition, and I'm already wondering whether that was a bad call because I'd already be 1 card ahead again. So I am going to... I'm doing it. I'm just going to advance. I'm going to spend a ration and I'm going to advance, and I'm probably going to regret it. So I spend a ration. We draw the next card. It is Twister Valley. At the start of every investigation, swap the first and last card in the row. This will only be in effect whilst the judges are on that space. So, because I need to add this to the track here, and because I don't have a lot of space in camera, I'm going to remove the cards that we have already advanced through. So the judges have advanced into Twister Valley. They have overtaken the perps, but Twister Valley does have a special rule that will come into effect at the start of the second investigation during the dusk phase, which will happen now because this card is done with. So we flip the token to the dusk side, and we spend a ration. In the dusk phase, the cards are played slightly differently. First of all, I will play one card from my hand. From that point on, I can either choose to play a card from my hand or draw a card from the deck. But by the end of it, I have to have played 3 cards from my hand, which will empty my hand, and 3 cards from the deck. The other thing of note is that whenever you play a card, you can play it before or after any cards that have already been played, and they will be resolved in the order that they are played out on the table. They will not be resolved in numerical order. I'm going to start by playing Stampede from my hand. The reason being, it's got some swapping and skipping options, so hopefully I can put some really bad stuff after it. So that's going to go down first. Next up, I'm going to draw a card from the deck. I have drawn Looters, so this will require some diplomacy, but then I will gain some bullets. And then I can either gain bullets or I can gain health, or I can actually do both, but each time that will advance the perps. So, I am playing Raiders from my hand next. And I'm going to put that at the start. It's another card that moves my meeple. Next up, I'm going to draw a card from the deck. I have drawn Improvising. That will use violence, so I would have to spend an ammunition, but I would gain some survival. Interesting. Now I'm going to draw another card from the deck. The card I have pulled is Helltrek Breakdown, and that will require spending diplomacy, but then the perps will advance, or I can spend survivability. We're going to put that here. And I've got to play the last card from my hand. So that's how the investigation breaks down. However, because we are at Twister Valley, at the start of every investigation, we have to swap the first and last card in the row. I'm actually feeling okay about this investigation at the moment. I'm okay. I'm not too bad. Because first of all, we have Friendly Warning, and that involves spending a diplomacy and a ration in order to advance my meeple. I am definitely going to do that. I do not have any diplomacy cards in my hand, so Judge Giant will have to spend a wound. I will then have to use my final ration, but I think it is totally worth it to advance the meeple again. We have drawn Muty Country. When revealed, add 1 ammunition token to this space. If the token is on this space when a team on this space advances, do not advance and take the token instead. Ah, okay. Okie dokie. So what that's going to do is it's going to stall me, but I will gain some ammunition. Next up we have the Raiders. I am still going to use the advance action here, so I am going to use violence twice, which involves spending 2 of my ammunition tokens. And then I would normally advance my meeple, but I cannot because of the location, so instead I will take the ammunition token. Next time I have an opportunity to advance the meeple, I will be able to move as normal. Next up, I have to have a stern chat with some looters. I do not have any diplomacy, so Giant is going to have to spend another wound. But I do gain another ammunition. And now I have options. Do I want to gain any more ammunition or any more wounds? Can I afford to let the perps advance? It must be noted that at the end of the dusk phase, they will advance for free. I never get that. I never get that option to advance for free, but the perps do. I know I can jump over the hell track, so they won't advance from that. I definitely don't want them to advance twice. Am I healthy enough? Do I want to give up a wound? No, I don't. I'm going to let the perps advance one space and take a wound token, and I'm not going to pick up any more ammunition. And I'm going to give the wound token to Judge Dredd. So we advance the perps. Dredd gains a wound. Next up, we have a stampede. First of all, we have to spend a survivability. We do not have one. We would have had one if improvising hadn't been moved to the end of the track, but it was. So Dredd's going to have to take a wound, so that's why I gave him that wound token back, so I could immediately take it off of him again. Next up, I have to take a wound from someone else. Who wants to be wounded? I'm going to wound Dredd again on the grounds that I can pick up a survivability card here, which I can spend instead of his wound later on if needed. So he's going to take another wound. Now I have the option of switching 2 cards if I want to. This is important because the swap action is the only action that isn't mandatory. And I don't want to, because I can skip the next card in the path, which is the hell track, and I can go straight to improvising and I can get that extra survivability card. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave them as they are, but then I'm going to skip hell track. To gain the survivability expertise, I have to perform a violence action, so I have to spend one of my ammunition tokens. Having done that, I gain this card, and it goes into my inventory to be spent later on. And that completes the dusk phase. Now we have problems. I don't have any rations left, so I have to take a radiation token. I'm going to apply the radiation to Anderson. She's still okay at the moment. And now the perps advance as well. So despite the fact I raced ahead of them, they've caught up quite quickly. I really need to get my meeple moving again. There are not a lot of location cards left, and I don't know exactly where max normal is. So from this point out, I want to be the one flipping those cards. I do not want to give them the opportunity to do that. Of course, it is a bright new day. And I need to draw a new hand of 6 cards. These are the 2 cards I've drawn from the deck, and look at the state of this. Spider's Lair. Immediately kill a judge, then swap and skip twice, or immediately kill a judge and advance the meeple, or spend a survival. And thankfully I do have a survival there. And then we have Irradiated Vehicle, which, although it stacks on the radiation tokens, all good things come from being irradiated. So those will go in sequence, and I play 2 cards from my hand. I'm going to play Ambush and the Law. Ambush does advance the perps, but I can avoid that option by using some good old violence, and yeah, I do not want them moving before I do. I think there's only 3 cards left in the location deck, so any one of those could be max normal. He could be the next card I pull, or he could be the 3rd card I pull. Either way, I want to be the one pulling the cards. So we're going to play these 2. And obviously this is, look at this. This has got to be the only card in the deck which is just straight good. It just gives you a survival expertise. Next I have to draw a card from the deck. We've got Slavers, so we're going to have to give those guys a stern talking to. And finally I have to play a card from my hand. And I'm going to play Toxic Ground because it's completely optional. I don't have to do it, but if it gets to this point and I really want to advance my meeple, I can gain 2 radiation tokens to do that. So that seems like a good option. So there are all of the exploration cards in order, and I am in a predicament. I have no rations, so once we get to the end of this row of exploration cards, I'm going to pick up more radiation as we go into the dusk phase. Furthermore, Anderson is very close to dying of radiation poisoning. She only needs 2 more tokens to do that, and both of my other judges are wounded and irradiated. There are, I believe, 3 cards left in the location deck. And I have 2 options here that will move my meeple. But one of the options will straight up kill one of my judges. I could advance 2 spaces, and that could well put me on max normal. And as soon as you find max normal, you win, regardless of how many judges have died, regardless of anything else. If, however, I take both of these move actions and do not find max normal, I am almost certainly going to die going into the dusk phase. So do I avoid the spiders by spending my survivability? Or I could fly by the seat of my pants, kill a judge, and hope that one of the next 2 location cards is max normal. And I've always said you should never give up an opportunity to advance the meeple, not ever. But I don't normally mean that if it's going to kill one of your characters. I know the other 3 cards in my hand are horrible. They're all bad things. They require rations that I don't have. If I don't find max normal this round, someone will certainly die at dusk. I am going to advance the meeple through the spider's lair. I'm going in, someone is going to die, and it's going to be Judge Anderson. I am sorry, Judge Anderson. Your psychic powers didn't help you enough. Take her badge, Dredd. If you make it back, you can put it in the Hall of Fame or something. I'm advancing the meeple. No way! That's max normal! The end! Oh wow! If the perps had advanced instead of me, they would have won. But I've won. I've actually won. Max Normal was the 8th card. He was as close to me as possible. And yeah, the perps were very, very close to getting him. Anderson is still warm. The spiders are still eating, and Dredd has found max normal. That's a win, because as soon as you advance onto his location, it's game over. You've won. Done. Too bad for max normal. He's been caught. He's been arrested. Justice is served. Wow. That's my first game of this, and I didn't expect to win. I do believe I had an exceptionally good run. I had, right off the bat, I had the injured dinosaur, which can give you 2 extra ration tokens. And even with that, I ran out of ration tokens by the end of the day. I did not have any ration tokens for the end of the dusk phase. That's something very different to Lost Expedition. Lost Expedition, you do seem to have more opportunities to pick up rations because there's always some big old piggies and snakes and things to kill and eat. So yeah, that's a bit of a shock. I generally feel like I was more tense playing this than I was playing Lost Expedition, and Lost Expedition is a pretty tense experience anyway, but I do feel like the decisions here were harder. There were fewer cards where the decision was really obvious. I think there's a couple of cards in Lost Expedition where it's like, where you're always going to take that option because that's the best one. But here, it was like every time you advanced your meeple, it hurt you in some way. You picked up some radiation, or you lost some rations, or you had to fight your way through something. I was very worried about running out of ammunition because I know that if you haven't got ammunition and you haven't got wounds to spare, then someone outright dies. Yet I ended up with 3 ammunition at the end, but I did seem to find quite a lot of ammo kicking about. I don't know if that's a difference between this and Lost Expedition, because in Lost Expedition, ammo is your hardest thing to come by because you don't tend to find much ammunition lying around in the jungle, whereas I guess you have more opportunities to find ammunition in the Cursed Earth. So I guess maybe it's flipped that a little bit. It's harder to get rations, but easier to get ammunition. I think I also got lucky with the locations. I had quite a few locations that didn't have special abilities on them. That's probably an unnecessary additional complication for this version of the game. I think the game is hard enough anyway. The fact I've won, I don't think is necessarily a true reflection of how difficult this game is. I definitely feel like the cards were quite kind to me. But yeah, I think having the extra events on the locations is unnecessary. The radiation is already adding an extra layer of complication over Lost Expedition. It's like eating away at your health bar from the other end. I didn't feel quite so worried about radiation once I realised that everybody gets one. Spider-Man swoops in and says everybody gets one. Yeah, you can apply one radiation to every judge without fear, because you have to have more radiation than you have health before it kicks in, and to have less than one radiation, you'd be dead anyway. I did notice that the tokens for this game are considerably thinner than the Lost Expedition ones. They are probably more than half the thickness, which I feel is a little bit of a cheap out. I guess if you've got to spend more on an IP like Dredd, you're going to have to maybe make some savings elsewhere, and reducing the card quality on your punch boards is one way of doing that. I do quite like this though. This is a little Justice Department field ration box which comes in the packaging just for storing your tokens in. It's not got dividers or anything, but it's quite neat. It's a little bit of a thematic fun. Overall, I'm not sure I'm in a position from this one playthrough to judge this game. I read quite a bit about this before playing, and the general consensus is it's way harder than Lost Expedition, to the point where a lot of people get quite annoyed with it, and they house rule things like giving all the judges extra health or starting the game with more ammunition. Obviously, I didn't truly experience that. I did notice I didn't really pick up many expertise cards. Normally, I have a few more of those to play with. I had to rely on wounds a lot more. I don't think I played anything wrong. When I go back and edit this video, I might notice a few things where I made mistakes, and maybe that will make a difference. The race aspect, where you're chasing the perps, that's interesting. I think that adds a little extra nuance that Lost Expedition doesn't have. I've always said, playing Lost Expedition, I said this a couple of times through the playthrough, you should never really give up an opportunity to move your meeple. And that's in Lost Expedition, where your main enemy is just attrition. The more cards you have to plow through, the more it's likely you're going to die. In this game, it almost forces your hand a little bit. You've got these perps that are already ahead of you at the start of the game, and you have to get past them. So really, giving up those opportunities to move your meeple hurts, especially if later on you have to move the perps further down the road. So I'm not sure I would ever miss an opportunity. I mean, I say that knowing that in the first round of the game I did give up an opportunity to advance my meeple in order to gain, I think it was an ammo token. But there's definitely an extra pressure there. I'm not sure yet whether it adds to the decision making or takes away from the decision making, because I consistently felt like I had to take the move actions. And in this particular case, even to the point where I fed one of my judges to some spiders in order to take that move action, because I was so worried that because we were neck and neck, I might get a card where the perps advanced and I had no way to stop them. It was something that was playing on my mind all the time, and I think that might have narrowed the decision space a little bit. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether this is an improvement over Lost Expedition or not. The artwork is way better. The artwork is fantastic. The theme is great. I'm in two minds. I think they've added extra stuff that makes the game more difficult, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, although Lost Expedition is already an incredibly hard game. They might have overcomplicated things a little bit too much. I do not like the psi powers. I appreciate they tried to make them more thematic, but I think it should have just been a third expertise, the same as survival and diplomacy. I don't see why they couldn't have just integrated that thematic nature into the cards. It's a case of, oh, you've come across this particular situation, but Anderson can use her psi powers to predict which way she should go or whatever to avoid that danger. Just use it like a normal expertise. I would have rather had that. I would rather it was just, like in Lost Expedition, simple case of you've got 3 people with 3 distinct attributes that you can cash in to get you further down the road. I would have preferred that than having a whole completely different way of using psi powers, although the psi powers actually did help me in this particular playthrough. It's not something that I particularly liked. I'm always for keeping things as simple as possible, and I feel like Lost Expedition is the basic framework of this game, and what they've done is they've bolted things on top. Nothing is really changed in terms of the core mechanisms, but they've bolted on a chase aspect, they've bolted on a radiation aspect, they've bolted on a psi aspect, they've bolted on the location events aspect. It's all extra towers on the structure. And I've never been overly keen on that approach to design. I think if you've got a really solid, interesting game, bolting extra bits on doesn't always work out. I don't know, I would have to play this one a little bit more, but this is not actually my copy. This copy was loaned to me by my friend Matt, and it has to go back to him at some point. But I do think I'm going to spend a little bit more time with it just to get a better feel for it, see if different card pools will give me more of that difficulty that I've read so much about. I guess at this point I don't have much more to say. I enjoyed this game, I enjoyed it the way that I enjoyed Lost Expedition. It's a bit agonizing, there are tough choices. Sometimes I'm pretty sure it's down to luck. I've definitely had games of Lost Expedition that I have won or lost through luck. And of course, it should be remembered that I was playing this game on the cadet setting, which is the easiest setting, which means there are 3 less locations to get through. If there had been another 3 locations before I could even get to max normal, I definitely wouldn't have sacrificed Anderson to the spiders, and I'm pretty sure I would have died on my next turn out. Which would be more in keeping with what other people have said about this particular game. So yeah, I think this is a tough game. I just don't think I've necessarily experienced its full wrath at this moment. And overall, I don't know. I think I veer more towards Lost Expedition, but I have played that a lot more than I've played this, which is a grand total of 1 time. I do know Lost Expedition does have an expansion pack as well, so Lost Expedition is the game that grants you the ability to expand your experience if you want to. But like I said at the start of the video, I do not think having Lost Expedition means that you won't ever need Cursed Earth in your collection. They do provide slightly different experiences with the same core mechanisms, and those core mechanisms are good. But I've talked for far too long, and if you are still with me at this point, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, please consider pressing that like button. If you have really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.